Congressman Brooks, so glad to have you on the Jeff Poor Show. How are you doing today?
Doing fine, Jeff. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Very excited to have you on. So we're in the midst of this government shutdown, and I know the president's coming on TV tonight, and I assume the Democrats are going to follow up with something afterwards. What are we looking at? What are all the players up to, and where are you at on it right now?
Right now, things are at an impasse. The Democrats and other open borders advocates are willing to accept the loss of thousands of American lives each year rather than secure the border. The president is unwilling to sacrifice those American lives on an annual basis. He is insisting on better border security. And until the Democrats are willing to budge in order to protect American lives, or the president caves in and decides not to do what is necessary to save those American lives, well, we're in an impasse.
Do you, we talk about the impasse, but it looks to me like it's just a black and white thing. There's no sort of middle ground. Maybe you could argue or quibble over the specific number of funding for the border wall, but to me, it's an all or nothing proposition.
Well, that's true in the concept of having better border security, but there's definitely negotiations and compromises that can be had on how much money to spend at any particular point in time on that better border security. And for emphasis, we need about $25 billion to provide the kind of border security, in particular the border wall, that will do for America what walls have done throughout thousands of years for so many different countries, so many different cities, and right now, one country being Israel. And $25 billion, we're down to $5 billion. So we've compromised 80% of the way with Democrats who prefer open borders over border security, but they're not willing to accept a 20% position that we now have. And so it's very difficult when you've already given up 80% of what you know is needed to save American lives.
What is the Democrats' play here? To me, they could come on TV tonight and say, well, we don't think, is it fathomable that they would say, we don't think this is a problem, we don't think that, or is it just the wall is not the right solution? It seems like the messaging here for Trump should be, we need the wall, but they're going to turn around and say, we don't need the wall for X, Y, Z. Meanwhile, you still have an illegal immigration problem.
I have heard the Democrats' public statements on this issue, and there are a few Republicans who utter the same things, but basically the Democrat play is to deceive the American people. I don't know of a better way to describe what is transpiring. The Democrats do not like the American electorate that we've had over the decades, and so they are highly motivated to change the American electorate in order to enhance their prospects of gaining political power by winning more elections. And let's be real clear, we're not talking about race, we're not talking about ethnicity. What we're talking about are millions of potential voters, around 60 to 70% of whom are in families that are heavily dependent on welfare, on living off the hard work of others. And that's a profile for a Democrat voter. So the Democrats see this as the lifeblood of their political party, and I don't know if they're going to be willing to compromise or not. It might be that this issue continues until the 2020 elections, at which point the public can decide whether they want border security or not. Do they believe in the Democrat dream of open borders with all the dead Americans that results, or do they believe in border security like almost all other countries on the planet have believed in for millennia?
Do you think if the candidates were, or if you did have Democrat candidates lining up for 2020 to run for president, it just seems to me that a lot of this is a product of that we're headed into a presidential cycle, so you need to really kind of stand your ground and go to your battle stations. Had this not been headed into a presidential cycle, maybe there might be more leeway and more room for compromise, or more willingness to compromise.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit because since I've been in Congress, which is since 2010, I've yet to see the Democrats show a willingness to support border security. Now, they'll mouth the words, but if you look at what they're talking about, the Democrats are primarily talking about the best way to open up our borders so that more illegal aliens can come in, and the follow-up is to figure out how best to turn them into registered voters, how best to get them on the public dole so that when they do vote, they'll vote Democrat. And that's a real sorry state of affairs. To me, it's a betrayal by the Democrats of the American people. I don't know if you've seen, and I'm going to give a House floor speech about this tomorrow, but the President, the White House, sent us a letter on Friday to us, being the United States Congress, that outlined some of the damage being done by illegal aliens. Over the last 2 years, our federal law enforcement officials have averaged apprehending 2,000 illegal aliens a year for the crime of homicide. They've averaged apprehending roughly 50,000 illegal aliens a year whose crime is assault on other people. 15,000 per year for sex crimes. And that doesn't get to the drug trade that also is costing roughly 70,000 Americans their lives each year in overdoses. By way of but one example, and this is in the President's letter to us, last year, roughly 15,000 Americans died because of just one drug, 90% of which is illegally transported over our porous southern border, heroin. 15,000 dead Americans from that one drug. And there are a lot of other drugs, of course, that are illegally transported over our porous southern border. So it really comes down to how many dead Americans are you willing to accept before you're willing to engage in the kinds of activities that are necessary for border security. And quite frankly, there is no answer to that question because the Democrats have not ever been for border security, and so there is no limit to the number of dead Americans that they are willing to accept in furtherance of their craving for political power.
You know,
you can tell I'm very, very upset with what the Democrats are doing to our country.
A lot of you and a lot of your colleagues really bring up that drug trade issue, and also, but what I think is getting missed a little bit, and you could talk about this, I think, the economic impact of illegal immigration on the country. You know, you have what it does to wages on one side of it, but also the burden it puts on the taxpayer, the burden it puts on government services, on our infrastructure, and things like that. I think is getting missed. I think that's what Trump ran on. Is that something that needs to be a little more of a focus in this argument for the wall?
Well, there's the emotional argument, which is the lost American lives caused by the Democrats' stance in favor of open borders. There is also the economic argument, which comes in two different layers, like you just described. One is wage suppression. When you have a huge surge in the labor supply, which is probably over 10 million, there's a Yale study that came out that says there are now over 20 million illegal aliens in America. That has a significant adverse effect on wages, particularly blue-collar wages, the people who are struggling the most to make ends meet. The second impact is on taxes and government services. And there are a lot of estimates on how much money is lost to American taxpayers each year from our southern border. The one that I find most persuasive says that the net tax loss to American citizens is roughly $116 billion per year. That's the difference between taxes generated by illegal alien activity, roughly $20 billion a year, and city, county, state, federal services consumed each year, roughly $136 billion a year, for a net tax loss to Americans of $116 billion. Now, if you divide our population, that number by America's population, if my math is right, that comes out to about $300 that each American citizen is losing in order to pay the additional taxes necessary to support illegal aliens that the Democrats are hoarding into our country.
Hey, Mo, this is Bailey, the producer. On this idea of sanctuary cities, which a lot of Democrats seem to be for, do you think maybe a step in the right direction would be to denounce this idea of sanctuary cities entirely? Because to me, it seems like it's almost like an invitation for illegal immigrants to migrate toward those cities over our southern border.
Well, it is an invitation, and it's another frustration point where you've got Democrats who are actively subverting federal law. You know, whatever happened to law and order? Whatever happened to respect for the law? And whatever happened to the fear that if you don't have respect for law and order, then you have anarchy, which basically means he who has the greatest amount of power, the biggest gun, the most accurate shot, is the one that controls neighborhoods, cities, counties, and states. Whatever happened to that? Certainly America was built on the concept of law and order, but the Democrats are undermining that with their so-called sanctuary cities, and keep in mind where they're headed with it. It's to change the voter pool and create large numbers of voters who are dependent on welfare, which makes them a typical Democrat profile voter. That's their base vote, okay? And to make matters worse, in some cities in America, about a dozen or more, that are controlled by Democrats, they have passed municipal ordinances allowing the registration of illegal aliens and lawful immigrants to vote. San Francisco being the largest city where it is lawful in San Francisco to register to vote, even though you're not an American citizen, with the impact being that foreigners are now actively participating in American elections and diluting the voting rights of American citizens. Now, if someone had told me a decade ago that that was going to happen, I'd have said, no way. But that gives you an idea of where Democrats want to take these cities that they control, and as they gain more power, that is also where they want to take our counties, our states, and our country. They just, for whatever reason, they just give the appearance of not liking American voters. So they want to change it. They want to turn us into a mini United Nations.
Congressman, are you surprised the Republicans have held together on this? They've all, traditionally, some Republicans have been kind of pro, open borders are because of what it does to wages. But it seems to me throughout this ordeal, McConnell's kept the Senate in line, and it sounds to me there's not a lot of pushback from in the Republican Party about the wall and about the shutdown.
Well, we'll find out more about that later today and tomorrow. In the House, we're going to have a series of votes. Democrats are going to force votes to reopen the government, where we, in turn, are being forced to accept the loss of American lives and the tax losses to support illegal aliens. And I anticipate there will be some number of Republican House members who will vote with the Democrats. Now, we've got two different motivations there. One is people mistakenly think with their hearts rather than their heads. They don't look at the damage done to American lives from open borders and illegal aliens. They only look at the plight of the illegal alien who's trying to get here. And you can't help but be sympathetic, because a lot of these countries are not where we would want to be, not where we would want to raise our kids, okay? And so that's one aspect. The other aspect is there are some big, powerful players in Washington, D.C. and around our country that like wage suppression because it means they will have more profitable businesses. And so they are very active in politics, particularly the United States Chamber of Commerce. This is their number one priority, by the way, is to import as much foreign labor as possible to suppress wages as much as we can, because that means that the Chamber of Commerce's constituent organizations that pay money to the Chamber, in turn, are more likely to make more profit.